Currently, we're on the grounds of what once used to be the Arthur G. Dozier Reformatory School for Young Boys here in Marianna, Florida. This place has a lot of notorious history. You've had young men who came here who have said later on in interviews that this place was a fear factory, if you will. This was a place where you were beaten and tortured for any little indiscretion. A lot of pain and suffering occurred within the walls of the compound that was once that place. We're going to take a quick tour of the location. I'm going to show you a very infamous building over yonder. They call it the White House. That was the place where these beatings occurred. Without further ado, let's get into the story a little bit about what happened to the walls of this place. It's easy to say that we are an ever-changing society, a modern society. We progress through life. We don't do the same things that we did back in the olden days. Now, corporal punishment back in the 1800s, early 1900s, mid 20th century was quite a bit different than it is today. So this place opened up in 1900. This was a place here in northern Florida that you would bring your children to, some as young as 4 or 5, all the way up to 21, depending on the crime and the severity of it. So this place, you would either bring your kids here or the justice system would send your kids here if you couldn't control them, if you couldn't corral them, if you couldn't correct them. Now, what kind of criminality would a teenager in the 1930s, 1940s here in Florida do to end up at a place like the Arthur G. Dozier Reformatory School? Well, the dreaded crime of sassing your teacher would bring you here. The dreaded crime of smoking cigarettes in the boys' room would bring you here. And also ditching school. If you weren't going to school, you would come to their school and they would quickly show you the way. Now, when you came here, you also had other teenagers that were stealing cars, doing other things, fighting or what have you. So you had a mix of kids, teenagers, young adults coming over here. And back in those days, it was segregated. So you had a section of the grounds where it was for whites. You had another section that was for blacks. Now, when you came over here, they would read you the riot act. Don't do this, don't do that. You can't go over here. You can't go over there. You can't talk to this side of the school. You can't talk to that side of the school. It was very, very strict. It was very, very regimented. And when you were here, they would tell you that there would be punishments given out for any little indiscretion. Even a joke that you would tell in class would be grounds for anything from restrictive punishment up into the main reason why we're here is a brutal whipping, a brutal beating. And that brutal beating was given by either one of a couple different implements. It would be either a paddle, a wooden board, sometimes it had holes in it, I don't know if theirs did, or it would be this leather strap. Looks like we have some form or another of a handle and then about an inch wide leather strap. And let me tell you, the tortures that some of these men giving interviews, how they would talk about these beatings is unreal. What they would do is, let's say you did something bad and they warned you, they said, if you do this, you know, this is the punishment. So they would direct you to this building right here, which is called the White House. This is the White House, and this was the isolation segregation unit here on the grounds. So if you did something bad, this was where the punishments were given. And here would be isolation cells. And what your punishment was, I guess it was dependent on the severity of the actions in which you were found guilty of. So you would come over here and get 15 lashes, 20 lashes, 50. Some even counted 125. And while you were here, while you were waiting for your beating, you had to stay here and listen to other kids getting beaten. And let me tell you, this wasn't a place where you were hearing all kinds of kids screaming or anything like that, because they had a rule, like you couldn't scream, you couldn't yell. When you were ready for your whipping, they would bring you to some form or another of like a bed, and they would have you lie on your belly, and they would tell you to grab a rail, kind of like this, and you had to look straight ahead. They told you, don't fight us, don't try to scream, don't try to escape, nothing like that, because it would be worse. If you came over here for 20 lashes, you try to fight them, you're easily gonna double that. And then they would just start beating the living tar out of you. You better not scream, because if you do, maybe they would start all over. And some of the men who have been interviewed about this place of horror, this was where it would all happen.
Linda, Captain Bill Nelson was just a kid when he was sent away to Dozier, but his story is enough to make even adults cry.
Bill Nelson's been a boat captain most of his life.
I made a good life for myself. I picked myself up and kept on going.
He's also a survivor of Florida's dark past.
It's wrong what they did to us up there.
Tonight, Nelson is speaking out for the first time about the 2.5 years he spent at the Dozier School for Boys. Just a skinny 11-year-old, he was sent away for a crime he was later exonerated of.
I was raped over there as a kid, and there were several boys raped. And if anything we spoke out about, we went to the White House.
It's a story many Dozier boys never lived to
A
tell.
lot of boys didn't make it. You know, they weren't strong enough to make it. Sometimes at night you could hear the screams.
We walked inside what's known as the White House, a small building where the temperature drops inside and paint peels off the walls, where Nelson remembers being tortured.
Sometimes you stay in there 2 or 3 days in chains, you know, and they beat you. And, you know, some of them made it, some of them didn't.
What do you think happened to them?
Well, they were beaten to death.
And of course, now you can see some of the statues here. This place has been made basically, I guess you would say, a memorial site. So you got some of the statues of the kids who would be beaten in this torture chamber, if you will. And some of those kids that were beaten, well, they're saying that they were also beaten so severely that some of them died, and they were buried on the grounds at their cemetery. And they're saying that they would see so-and-so kid, and they go to the White House, they're beaten too much, they can't take it, and next thing you know, they're wheeling them out in a barrel. And right here, this is a mock-up of what would happen, what would occur. And of course, the leather strap, this is what they would use. And they would tell you, hey, put your hands right there. And then they would beat the tar out of you. They closed down this place in June of 2011. You could see some of the tables that they would have at this facility. And up until that time, 2011, kids that were bad or they committed a crime, they would sit at these tables, probably playing cards, playing chess or checkers or talking about when the heck they're gonna get out of here so they can go on about their lives. And you also had some kids who couldn't seem to get past the mental and physical abuse that they were dealt with by the people, the authoritarians of this place. I mean, you have men who, after they left here, the beatings were so bad that it basically turned them against their own parents. And kids that were here at the school back in those days, they had to write their parents once a week. They had to write their parents and say, oh, everything is great. Everything is fantastic. I love this place. I can't believe that you guys didn't send me here sooner. Disneyland, what's that? No, it's just let me stay here. This is where I want to be. And you better, if you don't know what's good for you, you better write that letter the way they want you to write it. Because if you try to put in anything in that letter saying like, hey, they're beating the crap out of us, oh, they would tear that letter up. Hey, try again. And listen, if you don't try again, you're gonna get this or whatever. Or they just punch you right in the face. They punch you right in the face, knock out a tooth, and even worse. I mean, this place, a very, very notorious history, a very, very notorious past. This looks like this was the cafeteria where the kids would come and eat. I'm guessing that's the serving window right there. So you come and get your food, and then you sit down and you eat. And when you're done, put your tray down and go back to your cell or your cottage or whatever, wherever they were sending you. Down this road right here is the cemetery where the kids that died from the Arthur G. Dozier Reformatory would be buried. Now, some of these kids, they died under unusual circumstances, and there's really not many records available for exactly what happened to them. Between 1914 and 1952, according to the school's records, 31 graves were dug. And that's only the ones that they mentioned. I mean, honestly, we don't really know how many graves were actually dug. And also, weirdly enough, if your kid died at the school, they wouldn't call you to tell you that your kid was dead until they already buried them. And you were not allowed to go claim their bodies. And oftentimes, even if they were, a lot of the families, they're poor. They can't afford to disinter their son and, transport his body from northern Florida to southern Florida or what have you. So a lot of these kids, they died from maybe disease, malnutrition, the beatings themselves. I mean, we really, really don't know. I mean, it almost seems like the whole kids dying thing at the school was swept under the rug, and it's almost like some kind of weird legend or a part of some weird folklore. Right after the reformatory was closed, the state of Florida hired a company with a ground-penetrating radar machine to excavate the site of where the cemetery was, which is right ahead, to pinpoint exactly what graves were where and to find any additional graves, unmarked graves, so forth and so on. So they found about 55 separate graves, and they also later on found over 25 unmarked graves in this wooded area right around the cemetery. Now, in 2014, Florida Governor Rick Scott, he allocated or authorized $7,500 for each family who wanted to disinter their loved ones and bury them closer to where they are. Now, I don't know how many people have taken the money, but this right here is the cemetery, Boot Hill. This was where a lot of the young kids died for some reason or another. I mean, honestly, who knows how many bodies are buried under the very ground where I'm standing on and in this wooded area that encircles this cemetery. I want to say fairly recently, the state of Florida has allocated $20 million in a fund, a compensation fund, for some of the surviving men who were abused at the school. $20 million, but of course, you know, there's a lot of people that were locked up. So once you divide the money out, I mean, I don't know how much each guy is gonna get. It ain't gonna be very much after attorney's fees. You would think that the money could be better used for something else, but who knows? So maybe it's better, hey, they get a couple bucks, maybe they can buy themselves a car or clothes, or maybe just put some money away for a rainy day or whatever. But pretty horrific horror stories coming out of that area, ending in this area. Very, very strange indeed. Okay, guys, I'm out of here. I'll catch up with you on the next video. Peace out.